I never thought I'd end up in a battle with someone who wielded a clipboard like a weapon. But here I was, standing in my driveway in Burlington, Vermont, watching my heating oil truck driver shake his head apologetically while a red-faced woman blocked his path with her minivan. My name is Franklin Reynolds, and I'd moved into the Maple Ridge Estates development 6 months earlier, thinking I'd finally found a quiet place to work remotely and enjoy my early 40s in peace. The neighborhood seemed perfect at first, with its pristine sidewalks, matching mailboxes, and rows of colonial-style homes that all looked like they'd been dipped in the same 3 paint colors. I should have known that level of uniformity came with a price. The woman currently preventing my oil delivery was Patricia Mooreland, president of the Maple Ridge HOA. She was 52 years old, had that particular hairstyle that seemed to defy gravity and common sense, and treated the HOA rulebook like it was handed down from Mount Sinai. I'd had exactly 2 interactions with her before this moment, both involving nastagrams about my trash, cans being visible from the street for approximately 45 minutes longer than permitted. "Madam, I really need you to move your vehicle," the delivery driver, a patient man named Tom, was saying. "I've got 4 more stops today and this gentleman needs his oil." "Absolutely not," Patricia announced, crossing her arms over her purple fleece jacket. "This delivery is in direct violation of HOA Code Section 12.7, which clearly states that commercial vehicles over 15 feet in length cannot park in driveways between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. I walked down from my front porch, my breath visible in the January air. It was cold, properly cold, the kind of Vermont cold that makes you question why humans ever settled this far north. The weather forecast had been screaming about a record-breaking cold snap coming in the next few days, with temperatures expected to drop to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. "Patricia, it's a heating oil delivery. I need this oil. My tank is down to a quarter full." She turned those sharp eyes on me, and I swear I could feel the temperature drop another few degrees just from her stare. "Then you should have scheduled your delivery during approved hours, Franklin. The rules exist for everyone, not just the people who feel like following them." "The approved hours are 8 to 6, I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It's 10:30 in the morning. We're well within the time frame." "The vehicle length restriction supersedes the delivery window," she said, pulling out her phone and showing me a screenshot of the HOA bylaws. Sure enough, there it was, in tiny print that I'd somehow missed when I'd skimmed the document during closing. Tom looked at me with sympathy. "Look, man, I can't sit here all day arguing. Either I can make this delivery or I need to move on. What do you want to do?" I glanced at my oil tank gauge visible through the basement window. 200 gallons would get me through the next month easily, including this upcoming cold snap. But without this delivery, I'd be cutting it dangerously close. "Can I call and reschedule for after 6? I asked Tom. He winced. "Next available after-hours appointment is in 3 weeks. We're slammed because everyone's topping off before this cold front hits. 3 weeks. The cold snap was starting tomorrow night. "Patricia, please," I said, hating how much I was about to beg. "Just let him make the delivery. It'll take 15 minutes. Rules are rules, Franklin. Perhaps this will teach you to read your HOA documentation more carefully." She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who genuinely enjoyed exercising petty power. "Besides, I'm sure you'll be fine. It's just a little cold." Tom gave me an apologetic shrug, climbed back into his truck, and carefully backed out of my driveway, navigating around Patricia's minivan. She watched him go with satisfaction, then turned to me. "I trust we won't have this problem again," she said. "Your house," I said slowly. "You heat with oil too, right? I've seen the tank on the side of your property. That's really none of your business, but yes. However, I plan ahead and schedule my deliveries appropriately. She walked back to her minivan, and I noticed she'd left it running the entire time, wasting gas and spewing exhaust just to make her point. As she drove away, I stood in my driveway, fury and disbelief mixing in my chest. I pulled out my phone and called the oil company back, but just as Tom had said, they were completely booked. I tried 3 other companies. Same story. Everyone was either fully scheduled or not taking new customers because of the demand spike. I went back inside and looked at my oil gauge again. If I was really careful with the thermostat, maybe I could stretch it. I turned the heat down to 62 degrees and pulled on a sweater. That evening, I was working at my desk when I heard a truck outside. I glanced out the window and saw an oil delivery truck pulling into Patricia's driveway 3 houses down. My driveway had a direct sight line to hers, one of those quirks of how the development was laid out. I watched as the driver got out, unspooled the hose, and began filling her tank. The truck was easily 18 feet long, longer than the one that had tried to deliver to me. The delivery happened at 5:45 p.m., well within the stated delivery window, but that truck was absolutely over the 15-foot limit she'd cited. I grabbed my phone and took several photos, including clear shots of the truck's length, the company name, and the time stamp. Then I pulled up the HOA bylaws and read through section 12.7 again. The rule was clear. No commercial vehicles over 15 feet in residential driveways during those hours. Patricia had just violated her own rule. The same rule she'd used to block my delivery. The next day, I woke up to a changed world. The temperature had dropped overnight, and the news was calling it the worst cold snap Vermont had seen in 30 years. Negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chill taking it down to negative 30. The kind of cold that could kill you if you were stuck outside for too long. I kept my heat at 62, wearing layers and watching my oil gauge like a hawk. I'd done the math. If this cold snap lasted the forecasted 5 days, I'd run out of oil on day 4. Maybe day 5 if I was lucky and spent most of my time under blankets. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia standing there with a clipboard, naturally. "Franklin, I'm here to conduct a property inspection." "A what?" "Monthly property inspection. It's in Section 4 of the bylaws. The HOA has the right to inspect the exterior of properties to ensure compliance with community standards." I stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me so she wouldn't see how cold I was keeping my house. "Go ahead." She walked around my property with a critical eye, making notes. My landscaping was dormant because it was January. My siding was clean. My mailbox matched everyone else's. My trash cans were properly stored. "Your driveway needs to be reshoveled," she finally said, pointing to a light dusting of snow that had fallen that morning. "No snow accumulation permitted on driveways or walkways." "It's powder," I said. "It fell an hour ago." 24-hour compliance window from end of snowfall," she recited, "but I'm feeling generous today, so I'll give you until this evening." She started to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Franklin, I hope you've learned the importance of following HOA guidelines. Rules exist to maintain property values and community standards. When everyone follows them, we all benefit." I watched her walk away, her boots crunching on the frozen ground, and something cold settled in my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. That evening, I shoveled my driveway, even though the powder would have blown away naturally. As I worked, I noticed several of my neighbors had the same dusting on their driveways. Patricia didn't visit any of them. The cold intensified. Day 2 of the cold snap brought temperatures down to -18. I turned my heat down to 58 degrees and worked from my bed with my laptop, wrapped in 3 blankets. My oil gauge crept downward. I spent some time that day really diving into the HOA bylaws, reading every section, every subsection, every footnote. The document was 73 pages long, dense with legalese and restrictions. But buried in Section 18, I found something interesting. The bylaws stated that HOA board members were required to follow all rules with exemplary compliance, and that violations by board members could result in immediate removal from the board, pending a homeowner vote. Furthermore, board members found to be selectively enforcing rules could face personal liability for any damages resulting from discriminatory enforcement. I documented everything. The photos of Patricia's oil delivery with the oversized truck. The screenshots of her truck's specifications from the company website proving it was over the length limit. The records of my attempted delivery at a shorter length. Time stamps. Everything. On day 3, I called an attorney friend of mine who practiced in Vermont. His name was Gregory Chen, and we'd gone to college together. Greg, hypothetically, if someone in an HOA position blocked a necessary utility delivery, and that created a dangerous situation, what kind of liability would they face, hypothetically? Greg's voice was skeptical. "Frank, what's going on?" I explained the situation. The blocked oil delivery, the upcoming oil shortage, the record cold, and Patricia's selective rule enforcement. Greg was quiet for a moment. "That's actually serious, Frank. If you run out of heat in these temperatures, we're talking about potential property damage from frozen pipes, not to mention personal safety issues. If she knowingly prevented a necessary utility service during a weather emergency through arbitrary rule enforcement, that could be criminal negligence if something happens. At minimum, it's a civil liability nightmare. What should I do? Document everything. Every interaction, every temperature reading, every attempt to get oil delivered. If your heat fails, call the police non-emergency line and report it as a hazardous condition created by HOA interference. And Frank, don't let your pipes freeze. If you run out of oil, go to a hotel. I'm not leaving my house because of her power trip. Then get space heaters, several of them, because if this goes where I think it's going, you need to be safe first and vindicated second." I took his advice and drove to the hardware store, buying 3 electric space heaters and several extension cords. The store was packed with people buying emergency supplies. Everyone was feeling the bite of this cold snap. When I got home, there was a notice on my door. Another violation, this time for having my trash bins visible from the side of my house. The bins were in the designated storage area according to the bylaws, but Patricia had included a photo showing that if you stood at a very specific angle near the corner of a neighbor's property, you could see about 6 inches of one bin. The notice included a $50 fine. I crumpled it up, then smoothed it back out. Documentation. I scanned it and added it to my growing file. Day 4 arrived and my oil finally ran out. I woke up at 6 a.m. to a house that was 48 degrees inside. The furnace had tried to kick on, sputtered, and died. Outside it was -22 degrees. I plugged in all 3 space heaters, positioning them strategically to keep the pipes from freezing. Then I called Greg. "It happened. I'm out of oil. Are you safe? I've got space heaters." The house is hovering around 55 degrees with them running. Call the police non-emergency line. Report it. Get it on record. I made the call. The dispatcher was sympathetic but explained that they were handling multiple emergencies related to the cold snap. An officer would come by when available to file a report, but it might be several hours. In the meantime, sir, if you're in danger, please go to the warming shelter at the community center. I'll be fine, I said. I just need this documented. I spent the morning working in my bedroom with 2 space heaters pointed at me, wearing thermals, sweatpants, a hoodie, and a winter coat. My fingers were stiff, making typing difficult. Around 11 a.m., I looked out my window and noticed something interesting. Patricia's house, which I could partially see from my angle, had no steam coming from the roof vents. Every other house on the street had visible heat signatures, little wisps of warm air meeting cold atmosphere, but not hers. I grabbed my binoculars, feeling only slightly creepy about it, and checked more carefully. Her oil tank was on the side of her house, visible from the street. I couldn't see a gauge from here, but there was definitely no sign of heat running. An hour later, I saw Patricia's Mercedes pull into her driveway. She got out, went inside, and came back out 10 minutes later, moving quickly. She got back in her car and drove away. My phone rang. It was my neighbor to my left, a friendly guy named Robert Martinez. "Hey Frank, this is random, but do you know what's going on with Patricia? She just knocked on my door asking if she could borrow some space heaters. Her heat is out." That's what she said. She looked pretty stressed about it too. I lent her one, but it's the only spare I have. After we hung up, I went back to my window. 15 minutes later, Patricia returned, and I watched her carry 3 space heaters into her house. Over the next hour, I saw her make 2 more trips to her car, returning with what looked like extra blankets from a store. Her heat was out. During the same cold snap she'd prevented me from preparing for, I should have felt satisfaction, maybe even joy. Instead, I just felt tired and cold and angry that it had come to this. The police officer arrived around 2 p.m. His name was Officer James Kowalski, and he looked exhausted. "Mr. Reynolds, you called about a heating situation." I invited him in and explained everything. The block delivery, the HOA rules, Patricia's selective enforcement, and my now failed heating system. I showed him all my documentation. Officer Kowalski took notes, his expression growing more serious as I talked. "This is technically a civil HOA matter, but given the extreme weather and the safety implications, there might be criminal negligence angles here. I'm going to file this report, and I'm going to recommend that the detective division take a look at it." "I don't want to press charges," I said. "I just want this documented in case she tries to claim I violated some other rule." "I understand, but Mr. Reynolds, what she did was dangerous. If your pipes had burst, if you'd been injured, this would be a different conversation." He looked around at my space heaters. "You're managing okay, for now. The warming shelter is open if you need it. Don't be a hero about this." After he left, I continued my vigil at the window. I wasn't proud of it, but I couldn't help watching Patricia's house. Around 4 p.m., I saw an oil truck pull up to her property. I grabbed my binoculars again. The driver got out, talked to Patricia, and I could see even from this distance that the conversation wasn't going well. The driver shook his head, gestured to his truck, and got back in. Patricia stood in her driveway, hugging herself against the cold, watching him drive away. She couldn't get an emergency delivery either. Everyone was booked solid. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert next door. Patricia just asked if she could run an extension cord from my outdoor outlet to her house. I said no. "That seems dangerous, right?" I texted back. "Definitely dangerous. Also probably an insurance nightmare." As evening fell, the temperature dropped even further, -25 degrees. My space heaters were struggling, and my house was down to 52 degrees. I piled every blanket I owned on my bed and worked from there, my laptop generating a tiny amount of additional warmth. Around 8 p.m., my doorbell rang. I was shocked to see Patricia standing there, though standing was generous. She was shivering, her face pale, wearing what looked like multiple coats. "Franklin," she said, and her voice was small, nothing like the commanding tone she usually used. "I need help." I just looked at her. "My heat is out. I can't get an oil delivery. I have space heaters, but they keep tripping my circuit breaker when I run more than 2 at once. My house is 43 degrees, and I don't know what to do. Have you tried the warming shelter at the community center?" "I'm not going to a shelter. I just need to borrow a space heater, or maybe I could run an extension cord." "No," she blinked. "What? No, you can't borrow a space heater. No, you can't run an extension cord from my house. Rules are rules, Patricia. I'm sure you'll be fine, it's just a little cold." I watched her face as I repeated her words back to her. Recognition, then anger, then something that might have been fear. "This is different," she said. "This is an emergency." "It was an emergency for me too. I tried to tell you that. You blocked my oil delivery anyway." "I was enforcing HOA rules, selectively," I said. "Your oil delivery truck was over the length limit too. I have photos, time stamps. I've documented everything, Patricia, including the police report I filed this afternoon." Her eyes widened. "You called the police?" "I documented a dangerous situation created by HOA interference with essential utilities during a weather emergency. The officer who took the report said there might be criminal negligence angles to explore." Patricia's face went from pale to gray. "You're going to get me arrested over this." "I'm not going to do anything. You did this to yourself." I started to close the door, then paused. "The warming shelter is open 24 hours. You should go there." "I'm the HOA president. I can't be seen at a warming shelter like some kind of, then figure something else out." "Good night, Patricia." I closed the door and leaned against it, my hands shaking. Part of me felt terrible, part of me felt justified. Mostly, I just felt cold. I went back to my bedroom and tried to sleep, but guilt kept nagging at me. Yes, Patricia had created this situation through her own actions. Yes, she'd been petty and cruel and power-hungry, but people could die in cold like this. Was I really going to let my anger potentially put someone at risk? Around midnight, I gave up on sleep and checked outside. Patricia's car was still in her driveway. Lights were on in her house. She hadn't gone to the shelter. I called Greg. "Frank, it's midnight. This better be good." "Patricia's heat is out too. She came here asking for help." I turned her away. Silence on the other end. "Then, what do you want me to say? That you did the right thing? That you didn't? I don't know. I just feel like I'm becoming the same kind of person she is." "Frank, you're not responsible for her choices. She created this situation. You offered a solution, the warming shelter. If she's too proud to take it, that's on her. But if something happens, it's because she blocked your oil delivery, then failed to properly maintain her own heating fuel, then refused multiple solutions because of her ego. None of that is your fault." I knew he was right. But knowing it didn't make me feel better. Day 5 of the cold snap was somehow even worse. -28 degrees. My house stabilized at 50 degrees with all 3 space heaters running constantly. My electric bill was going to be astronomical. Around 9 a.m., I saw Patricia leave her house, and I noticed she went to Robert's door again. Their conversation was brief, and he shook his head. She tried the house on her other side, owned by a quiet couple named the Hendersons. Same result. She was going door to door, looking for help. And apparently, word had spread about what she'd done to me, because no one was helping her. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but then I remembered standing in my driveway, begging her to let the oil truck make my delivery, and watching her smile as she refused. Around noon, An HOA board member named Susan Crawford came to my door. She was 63, retired, and had always seemed reasonable in the few interactions I'd had with her. "Franklin, can we talk?" I let her in, and she looked around at my space heater setup with concern. "I heard what happened with your oil delivery," she said, "and I want you to know that not all of us agree with how Patricia handles things. She's the president. She is, but that doesn't mean she speaks for the entire board. Several of us have received complaints about her selective enforcement and her aggressive interpretation of the bylaws." Susan pulled out a folder. "I've been documenting issues for months, trying to build a case to call for a vote of no confidence. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need your help. Your situation with documentation and a police report could be the thing that finally gets her removed from the board. But I need you to file a formal complaint with the HOA. I thought about it. What happens if she's removed?" "The board appoints an interim president until the next annual meeting, where homeowners can elect a new one. We'd also review all of her enforcement actions for the past year and rescind any that were clearly discriminatory, including my current violations and fines." "Absolutely." I agreed to file the formal complaint and spent the next hour working with Susan to document everything properly. When she left, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Franklin, I'm sorry this happened to you. Patricia has always been difficult, but this crossed a line." After Susan left, I tried to focus on work, but I kept getting distracted by checking on Patricia's house. Around 2 p.m., I saw something that made me sit up straight. Patricia was outside, trying to pour something into her oil tank. She had a red gas can and she was using a funnel. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in with the camera. She was pouring gasoline into her heating oil tank. "No, no, no," I muttered. "That was incredibly dangerous. Gasoline and heating oil weren't interchangeable, and mixing them could damage the furnace or even cause an explosion." I faced a choice. I could let her continue and potentially blow up her house, or I could help someone who'd shown me nothing but contempt. I grabbed my coat and ran outside, the cold hitting me like a physical wall. "Patricia, stop." She looked up, startled, and nearly dropped the gas can. "What are you doing?" I called out, jogging across the snow-covered lawns between our houses. "I'm putting fuel in my tank so I can run my heat," she said defensively. "That's gasoline. You can't put gasoline in a heating oil furnace. Fuel is fuel." "No, it's not. Gasoline burns at a completely different temperature. You'll destroy your furnace at best, and at worst, you could start a fire or cause an explosion." She looked at the gas can, then at me, and for the first time since I'd met her, Patricia Mooreland looked genuinely lost. "I don't know what else to do," she said quietly. "I'm so cold, Franklin. My house is 40 degrees. I can't get my space heaters to work without tripping the breaker. I can't go to a shelter. I'm the HOA president. People expect me to have my life together." "Pride is going to get you killed," I said. "Or worse, it's going to burn your house down and potentially take the neighbors with it." I took the gas can from her and set it down, away from the oil tank. "You need to go to the warming shelter. This isn't sustainable." "I can't." "Then you need to figure something else out, because you can't stay in a 40-degree house, and you definitely can't pour gasoline into your heating system." She stood there, shivering, and I could see her struggling with her pride, her ego, everything that made her who she was. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked. "After everything I did to you." "Because I'm not you," I said simply. "I'm not going to let someone get hurt, even if they deserve it a little bit." She flinched at that, but didn't argue. "Look," I said, "I have a spare bedroom. It's not warm, maybe 55 degrees, but it's warmer than 40. You can stay there until this cold snap breaks and you can get an oil delivery." "I can't accept that." "Then freeze in your house. or go to the shelter. But those are your options, because I've done my good deed for the day by stopping you from blowing yourself up. I walked back to my house, leaving her standing in her driveway. I'd offered. What she did with the offer was up to her. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. Patricia stood there with an overnight bag, and she looked like each word was being physically pulled from her throat. I would appreciate the use of your spare room, just until the weather breaks. I let her in and showed her to the guest bedroom. It was small with a single bed and a dresser, and it was cold, but the space heater I moved in there brought the temperature up to a bearable level quickly. There are extra blankets in the closet, I said. Bathroom is across the hall. Thank you, she said stiffly. The rest of the day was awkward. We moved around each other like wary cats, not speaking unless necessary. I made dinner, a simple pasta dish, and offered her some. She accepted with obvious reluctance. We ate in silence for a while before she finally spoke. I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. She set down her fork. When I became HOA president 5 years ago, this neighborhood was a mess. People weren't maintaining their properties. There were cars parked on lawns, trash everywhere. I worked hard to turn it around to make this a place where people would want to live, where property values would go up. By being a dictator, by enforcing the rules, she said sharply, then softened. But yes, I got carried away. I started seeing violations everywhere. I started enjoying the authority, and I started treating people like they were less important than the rules. Why did you block my oil delivery? She was quiet for a long time. Because you were new and you hadn't fallen in line yet. You didn't attend HOA meetings. You didn't volunteer for committees. You were just living your life, not caring about the community standards I'd worked so hard to establish. And that annoyed me. So you punished me. Yes, she looked me in the eye. And I'm sorry, truly sorry. I let my ego and my power trip put you in danger. I did the same thing to myself, and I was too stubborn to admit I needed help until it was almost too late. It wasn't enough. An apology couldn't undo the stress, the cold, the fear of frozen pipes and ruined property. But it was something. What happens now? I asked. Susan Crawford is calling for a vote of no confidence. She came by earlier this week with the petition. She has enough signatures to force the vote. And I'm going to resign before it comes to that, effective immediately. She laughed, but it was bitter. Turns out that when you treat people badly, they don't rush to your aid when you need help. Who would have thought? Lots of people think it. You're just learning it the hard way. We finished dinner in silence, and Patricia went to bed early. I stayed up working, trying to catch up on everything I'd fallen behind on during this miserable week. Day 6 brought a minor miracle. The temperature rose to -10 degrees. It was still brutally cold, but the worst of the cold snap was over. More importantly, the oil company called. Mr. Reynolds, we have a cancellation for this afternoon. Can you take a delivery at 2 p.m.? Absolutely. Great. And sir, I saw the notes on your account about the HOA interference. I want you to know that we've flagged that address in our system. If anyone tries to block a delivery to you again, we'll be calling the police immediately. At 2 p.m., the oil truck pulled into my driveway. I watched from the window as Tom, the same driver from before, got out and started unspooling the hose. I walked outside to greet him. No interference today, not a soul in sight, he said with a grin. Let's get you filled up. The sound of heating oil flowing into my tank was better than any music I'd ever heard. When Tom finished, I paid the bill and added a generous tip. Thanks for coming back, I said. Hey, you're a paying customer who got screwed over by a power-hungry HOA president. Least I could do is make sure you don't freeze. After he left, I went inside and turned my thermostat back up to 68 degrees. The furnace kicked on with its familiar rumble, and warm air started flowing through the vents. I nearly cried with relief. Patricia emerged from the guest room, attracted by the sound of the furnace. "You got your delivery." "I did. Want me to call the company and see if they can fit you in?" She nodded, and I made the call. They could come tomorrow morning first thing. Patricia scheduled it immediately, providing her credit card information over the phone. That evening, with the house warming up to reasonable temperatures, Patricia and I had an actual conversation. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "After you resign?" "I honestly don't know. Being HOA president has been my entire identity for 5 years. I retired early, my kids are grown and gone, my ex-husband is remarried in California. The HOA gave me purpose, or at least I thought it did." "Maybe try finding a purpose that doesn't involve making people miserable," she laughed, and it sounded genuine this time. "Fair point. Susan mentioned that the community center is looking for volunteers for their literacy program. Maybe I'll try that. Just don't bring your clipboard." I make no promises. The next morning, Patricia's oil delivery arrived right on schedule. I watched from my window as her tank was filled, and I saw the visible relief on her face. She came back to my house to collect her things. "Thank you, Franklin, for everything. For stopping me from doing something incredibly stupid with that gasoline. For giving me a place to stay. For not letting me freeze to death, even though I probably deserved it a little bit. You didn't deserve to die. You just deserved to learn a lesson." "Lesson learned." She paused at the door. "I'm going to file the paperwork to resign from the HOA board today. And I'm going to recommend that Susan take over as interim president. She'll do a better job than I ever did." After she left, I spent the day enjoying my warm house and catching up on work. My fingers were finally nimble again, and I could type without wearing gloves. 2 days later, I received an email from Susan Crawford. Patricia had officially resigned. Susan was now interim president, and the board had voted to rescind all violations and fines issued by Patricia in the past 6 months. My record was clean, and I was getting a refund check for the $50 fine. Additionally, the board was reviewing the entire HOA bylaws document to remove contradictory and overly restrictive rules. The 15-foot commercial vehicle restriction was on the chopping block, along with about 20 other ridiculous provisions. "We're committed to making Maple Ridge Estates a community again, not a police state," Susan wrote. "Thank you for your patience and for bringing these issues to our attention." The next week, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. She was dressed casually without her usual power suit aesthetic, and she looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. "Franklin, how are you?" "Warm," I said with a smile. "You?" "Same. And I started volunteering at the literacy center. It's actually really fulfilling. I'm helping a woman from Somalia learn to read English, and she's teaching me some Somali in exchange." "That's great, Patricia." "It is." She hesitated, then added, "I'm also in therapy. Turns out I have some control issues stemming from my divorce and empty nest syndrome. Who knew?" "Good for you for getting help." "Yeah, well, freezing in my own house while my neighbors refused to help me was a bit of a wake-up call." We chatted for a few more minutes before parting ways. It wasn't quite friendship, but it was civil, which was more than I'd expected a week ago. A month later, the HOA held a special meeting to elect a new president. Susan Crawford won by a landslide, and her first act was to establish an emergency assistance fund for homeowners facing utility issues or other crises. The fund would help cover emergency deliveries, repairs, or temporary solutions to prevent situations like mine from happening again. "We're a community," Susan said during her acceptance speech. That means we help each other, especially during difficult times. Rules are important, but people are more important. The room erupted in applause, and I noticed Patricia clapping along with everyone else, genuine smile on her face. Spring came, and with it, the thaw. The neighborhood emerged from the brutal winter with a few casualties, mostly frozen pipes and damaged roofs from ice dams, but no serious injuries. My house had survived intact, thanks to the space heaters and my eventual oil delivery. I was working in my front yard one Saturday in April, planting some flowers to brighten up the landscaping when a police car pulled up. Officer Kowalski got out and walked over. "Mr. Reynolds, do you have a minute?" "Of course." "Is something wrong?" "Actually, I wanted to give you an update. The detective division reviewed your case, and while they determined there wasn't enough for criminal charges, they did send a formal warning to the HOA board about interference with essential utilities. It's on record now, so if anything like this happens again, there'll be a paper trail. I appreciate that. We also used your situation as a case study in our community outreach training, how not to let petty disputes escalate into dangerous situations during weather emergencies. Glad my misery could be educational, he laughed. For what it's worth, you handled it well. A lot of people would have let anger get the better of them. You found a middle ground between revenge and being a doormat. After he left, I thought about that. Had I found a middle ground? I documented everything, filed complaints, let Patricia face the consequences of her actions. But I'd also stopped her from making a fatal mistake and given her shelter when she needed it. Maybe that was growth. Maybe that was being an adult. Or maybe I'd just been lucky that my better instincts had won out over my baser ones. That evening, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Patricia standing there with a homemade pie. "Apple," she said, holding it out. "From scratch. I'm trying to learn to cook now that I have free time." "Thanks, Patricia. You didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to. Can I come in for a minute?" We sat in my living room, now comfortably warm, and ate pie while she talked. "I've been thinking a lot about that week," she said. "About how I ended up as the villain in my own story, and I realized something. I was so focused on controlling everything around me that I lost sight of why I wanted to do it in the first place." "Why did you want to do it?" "Because when I first moved here, this neighborhood felt chaotic and unwelcoming. I thought if I could just make everyone follow the rules, it would feel like home. But home isn't about rules. It's about people looking out for each other." "That's very philosophical for someone who once fined me for having my trash bin visible at a weird angle," she laughed. "God, I was insufferable, wasn't I? Little bit. The thing is, I think I needed to lose everything to face the consequences of my actions to become a better person, and as much as it sucked at the time, I'm grateful it happened. Even the part where you almost blew yourself up with gasoline. Especially that part, because that's when I realized you were a better person than I was. You could have let me do it. You could have watched me destroy my furnace or worse, but you didn't. I'm not a monster, Patricia. No, but I was, and you showed me a different way to be." We finished our pie, and she left with a promise to bring me another one once she'd perfected her crust recipe. After she was gone, I stood at my window, looking out at the neighborhood. Maple Ridge Estates wasn't perfect. The HOA was still annoying, with its rules about mailboxes and lawn care and trash bins. But it was better now, more focused on community than control. Summer arrived, and with it, block parties and neighborhood barbecues. Susan Crawford had made community events a priority, and people actually showed up. I met neighbors I'd never spoken to, learned names and stories, and found that I actually liked living here. Patricia became a regular fixture at these events, but in a different capacity than before. Instead of patrolling with her clipboard, She was helping set up tables, serving food, and actually talking to people like they were friends rather than subjects. At one barbecue in July, I overheard her talking to a new resident who just moved in. "The HOA seems pretty relaxed here," the new guy was saying. "It is now," Patricia said, "but that's a relatively recent development. We had some leadership changes earlier this year that really improved things." "What happened?" "Let's just say the previous president learned some important lessons about the difference between leadership and tyranny." She caught my eye across the yard and smiled, and I raised my beer can in salute. In August, I received a letter from the HOA. For a moment, my old anxiety kicked in, memories of violation notices and arbitrary fines. But when I opened it, I found something different. It was a thank you note, signed by Susan Crawford and the entire HOA board, thanking me for my patience during the transition period and for my willingness to work with the board to improve community standards. Enclosed was a gift card to a local restaurant. "Your experience helped us realize that we'd lost sight of our mission," the note read. "We're committed to doing better, and we appreciate your continued membership in our community." I stuck the note on my refrigerator next to a photo of the neighborhood 4th of July celebration. September brought the first hints of fall, and with it, the knowledge that another Vermont winter was coming. I scheduled my oil delivery early, making sure my tank was full well before the first frost. The oil company sent a confirmation email with a note: "No HOA interference on file." Delivery scheduled for September 15th. The delivery went off without a hitch. Tom pulled up at 10 a.m., filled my tank, and even chatted with me about his kids' upcoming school year. No drama, no blocked driveways, no clipboards. "Heard the crazy HOA lady resigned," Tom said as he was packing up. "She did. Things are better now. Good. You guys deserve a normal neighborhood." After he left, I saw Patricia working in her garden. She waved and I waved back. It was normal, almost boring in its pleasantness. That evening I was on my porch with a beer when Patricia walked over. "Mind if I join you, free country?" She sat in the other chair and we watched the sunset together in comfortable silence. "I saw you got your oil delivery," she finally said. "I did. Early this year, learned my lesson." "We both did." She paused. "Thank you, Franklin, for not giving up on me even when I deserved it. You're welcome. But you did the hard work. You changed. That wasn't me, maybe, but you gave me the push I needed." She stood up to leave, then turned back. "Susan told me the board is voting next week on whether to eliminate the HOA president position entirely and switch to a rotating committee system. I told her I think it's a great idea. Too much power in one person's hands." "Sounds like you really have learned something." "I have. I learned that being right isn't the same as being good. And I learned that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is exactly what you need." After she left, I sat on my porch until the stars came out, thinking about the strange journey that had brought us to this point. A blocked oil delivery during a record cold snap had nearly frozen us both, literally and metaphorically. But somehow, we'd both emerged thawed, changed, maybe even better. October arrived with its brilliant foliage, and Maple Ridge Estates looked like a postcard. The HOA held its annual meeting, and I actually attended this time. Susan Crawford presented the new bylaws, streamlined from 73 pages to 28, focused on genuine community standards rather than arbitrary restrictions. The vote was unanimous to adopt them. Patricia stood up during the public comment period. "I want to apologize to this community for my tenure as president. I let power go to my head, and I made people's lives harder instead of better. I'm grateful to this board for their patience and for their commitment to fixing the problems I created." People applauded, and I saw genuine forgiveness in their faces. Maybe we were all learning something about grace. When winter arrived again, I was prepared. My oil tank was full. My space heaters were stored away as backups, and my pipes were insulated. The neighborhood weathered a cold December with minimal issues, and when a single mother 3 houses down had her furnace die, the HOA emergency fund covered a temporary heating solution while repairs were made. Patricia was the first person to volunteer to help, bringing over meals and keeping the woman's kids entertained during the crisis. "I know what it's like to be cold and desperate," I heard her tell the grateful mother. "Nobody should have to go through that alone." On Christmas Eve, the neighborhood held a luminaria walk, paper bags with candles lighting the sidewalks. I walked with Robert Martinez and his family, and we ran into Patricia volunteering at the hot chocolate station. "Merry Christmas, Franklin," she said, handing me a cup of cocoa. "Merry Christmas, Patricia. Think it'll be a cold winter, probably. It's Vermont." "Well, we're all ready this time. Full oil tanks, working furnaces, and a community that actually helps each other. Progress. Progress," she agreed. As I walked home through the candlelit streets, warm cocoa in hand, I thought about how far we'd all come. A year ago, I'd been new to this neighborhood, isolated and focused on my own life. Patricia had been a tyrant with a clipboard. The community had been fragmented, everyone following rules but not connecting. Now, we were something different, not perfect but better. We'd learned hard lessons about power, pride, and what it meant to be part of a community. The oil delivery incident could have destroyed us all, could have led to lawsuits and frozen pipes and irreparable damage. Instead, it had become the catalyst for change, for growth, for becoming the kind of neighbors we all needed. I reached my house, warm and well lit, and looked back at the glowing neighborhood behind me. Maple Ridge Estates wasn't just a development with matching mailboxes anymore. It was home, and maybe that had been the point all along. The new year brought new leadership to the HOA. The rotating committee system was implemented, with different homeowners taking turns managing various aspects of community maintenance. Patricia joined the Emergency Response Committee, using her organizational skills for good rather than tyranny. I joined the Social Committee, helping plan events and build the sense of community that had emerged from our difficult winter. It turned out I was pretty good at it, and I actually enjoyed the work. One February morning, almost exactly a year after the blocked oil delivery, I woke up to another cold snap warning. -20 degrees forecasted, possibly colder. But this time, my oil tank was full. My furnace was maintained. And when I checked my email, there was a message from the HOA committee. "Cold weather alert. Please check on your neighbors, especially elderly residents. Emergency shelter information attached. Hot meal station will be available at the community center. Nobody faces this cold alone." I forwarded the email to Patricia, adding a note. "Look how far we've come." She replied within minutes, "All because you wouldn't let me blow myself up with gasoline. Thanks for that, by the way." The cold snap came and went. Everyone stayed warm. The community center hosted families who needed backup heating. Neighbors checked on neighbors. The emergency fund covered 3 oil deliveries for people who'd run low. And through it all, no one brandished a clipboard. No one blocked a driveway. No one let pride and power turn a minor issue into a dangerous crisis. We'd learned, all of us. The hard way, maybe, but we'd learned. Standing in my warm house, looking out at a neighborhood that had become a real community, I realized that sometimes the worst things that happen to us teach us the most important lessons. Patricia learned about the difference between authority and tyranny. I learned about the balance between standing up for myself and showing compassion. The neighborhood learned that rules without humanity are just oppression with paperwork. And we all learned that even in the coldest winter, even when heat fails and oil runs out and people show their worst selves, there's always a chance for warmth. Not just from furnaces and space heaters, but from the human capacity to change, to forgive, and to build something better from the ashes of what failed. The oil delivery incident was behind us now, a story we'd tell at neighborhood barbecues with shaking heads and rueful laughter. But it had shaped us, changed us, made us into a community worth being part of. And as another Vermont winter slowly gave way to spring, I was grateful for every moment of it, even the coldest ones. Especially those, because they'd shown us who we really were and who we could choose to become. Patricia Mooreland was no longer the HOA Karen with a clipboard and a power complex. She was a neighbor, a volunteer, a person who'd learned hard lessons and come out better on the other side. And I was no longer just Franklin Reynolds, the new guy trying to stay under the radar. I was part of something bigger, something that mattered. We were Maple Ridge Estates, and we'd survived our coldest winter together. That was worth more than all the perfectly matched mailboxes in the world.